Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center. Welcome to Knife AQ number 41, the knife series where I answer all your knife questions, whether they're sharp or dull. Good stuff this week, including we're going to talk about the difference between bushcraft and survival, the best way to flip your CEO Flipper, and a whole bunch of sharpening questions. Let's get into it. Thank you, as always, everyone who has submitted your questions to this series just by leaving your comments in the comments section on this channel. As always, if you want a chance to get one of your questions featured, you know what to do. Just drop those down below and we'll pick out some good ones. Starting this week with David Bidwell, who asks, "Hey David, got a carpet cleaning project coming, a carpet cutting project. What do you recommend?" Got one thing right here I think would make a great option, and that's the new Cold Steel Click and Cut series. Now, what I really like about the Click and Cut for a project such as this, all kinds of just kind of around the home construction-y type projects, is it's affordable, about 25 bucks right now. It's comfortable, and the blades are interchangeable. You can see it pops right out there when you disengage the triad lock here on the back, so you've got that triad lock stability, and then it's very easy to click it into place and go to town. You're ready to go. Out of the box comes with 3 blades. You've got a drop point and 2 utility blades, one of them serrated and one of them plain edge. Either of those utility blades especially, I think is going to be great for a carpet project. You've got the kind of edge you need, you've got that nice sharp point, you can just go to town. And the best part is you can exchange these blades. You can buy 3 packs of extra blades, including just the single blade styles. You can have some extra utility blades. That way you can pop it out and swap a fresh one in rather than stopping to have to resharpen as you go. And the steel on these, it's a 420 steel, so it's not going to hold an edge forever. But you can take all the blades you use back home at the end of the day, sharpen them up for the next day, and you're good to go. It's kind of that happy medium between just a plain old box cutter blade or a dedicated knife. I did mention comfort. What's nice about this over something like a folding knife is you don't have a seam here on the front, kind of like a fixed blade in that regard. So there's no hot spot from kind of that open area that a pocket knife might normally have. You'll be able to push through a little bit more without hurting yourself quite as much. And especially on something heavy like carpet, very, very much appreciated. You've also got the benefit of faster access. This comes with a belt sheath. Slide it right in there. It does have a Velcro strap, which you can, if you want, you can just keep it out of the way like I had it here. So you got fast access in and out. I think they're very nice and should probably do a very good job for you for your carpet project. All right, next question comes from Keith Keme. I just received my CEO Flipper, and it was a bit difficult to open at first. The odd thing is it's actually becoming more difficult to open over time. Do you have any tips I can try, such as lubricating, or will it eventually break in with more use? Sure, CEO Flipper, probably one of the more, kind of the bigger hits of this year so far. Comes in about 40 bucks, but I didn't really clock this when I first got the knife myself because I didn't have a problem with it, but we have heard a little bit of a current of feedback from folks who having a little bit of trouble with the Flipper, and I didn't quite understand why until I kind of got down and figured it out myself. The reason being there's kind of 2 different, shall we say, motions when you go to use a flipper, or there's 2 different types of styles of flipper knives out there that each requires a slightly different motion. A lot of folks, which I think are the folks that might be having a little problem with this, tend to use what's called the light switch method or the light switch flip, where you're literally like trying to flick a switch, like pulling your finger back and launching the blade. Me personally, I just, as a matter of instinct, I do more of a push button flip, where instead of trying to pull the flipper, you're kind of pushing it in. And that's the way the CEO Flipper really likes to be flipped. So rather than that pull, which can get a little painful if it doesn't flip, just rock or lock your fingertip in place, push it down, kind of at a slight angle towards the back, and it opens up super easy. That's the way I flip most flippers personally. Most tend to work that way, whether they also work with the light switch method or not. So like I said, I'm sorry I never noticed that when these first came out, so I could communicate that a little bit better. But hopefully that helps. You probably don't need to lubricate it, although general lubrication can help from time to time, of course, with any knife, but it might just be a slightly different motion than you're used to. At least that's the best I can figure here. Hope that helps you out. All right, next question comes from Jack Malone. I like the Cold Steel 4max. Me too. Very cool knife. And I'm interested in something close to it as a fixed blade. The context here is that the 4max is actually proportionate for me. Apparently that's a thing. I need heavy knives, I guess. Yeah, very cool knife, the 4max. Even in the Scout version right here, which is the most affordable version of it, which comes in about 110 bucks. Got a 4-inch blade of AUS 10 steel and that nice long synthetic handle. And that's kind of the defining feature for me. You've got a lot of handle space, a little bit, just enough that you can kind of do some light chopping with it, which for a folder, that sounds stupid, but it feels that way anyway. So I wanted to find you something with a very similar style of blade and a good long handle. What I found, you might not get the choppy ability out of it, but I really like the Lion Steel M3 fixed blades, made in Italy, coming in about just over 140 bucks. Blade length, about the same. See, we've got about 4.5 inches listed on the website. So overall length, a little tiny bit longer than that 4max, but very similar blade profiles as you can see there. The characters of cutting on each of them is going to be a little bit different. Thickness on them actually about the same. Each one about 3/16 of an inch or thereabouts. But you've got a full flat grind on the Lion Steel. It's going to be a little bit slicier, but you've still honestly got plenty of strength for any kind of heavier use that you'd be able to press a 4.5-inch blade to. It's just going to work very nicely, and very comfortable handles on these. There are a couple of wood options, I think a G10 option also, but this is the Santos wood, which is a type of mahogany. Got some ridges there for a little extra traction, some nice swells for an excellent grip. Feels really nice. You've got a finger guard there. Now, overall length, it is a little bit shorter, even though the blade length is longer. Actual grippable handle is very close to the same. You may be giving up just a tiny bit with the Lion Steel, but it's still a very roomy handle. And then the main difference in overall length is going to come where you don't have that choil like you do on the 4max. But you know, provided you're not wanting to chop with this size fixed blade, you really don't need that choil with this fixed blade design, because you can get right up there behind the edge and still have that nice solid grip. Sheaths on these guys are quite nice. It is a leather affair, as you can see. Retention strap on the front with a snap and standard closure or standard belt loop on the back. These are just really well done. I mean, I've said this before about Lion Steel's fixed blades, is they're kind of like a little bit of a hidden gem out there. They're putting out phenomenal stuff, but they aren't as thought of like right off the bat as some of the other bigger competitors out there. But definitely worth a look. Did I mention the steel on this? Nylock steel, so it's not stainless like the 4max, but you should get edge retention somewhere around D2 level, but with more edge stability, a little bit higher toughness to go along with it. Just awesome stuff. All right, next up, Ryan Cole asks, can you explain the difference between outdoor survival and tactical knives? Isn't a knife just a knife, and which an expensive knife under $100, fixed blade and folder will fulfill all three functions best? It's an interesting question because, yeah, sure, like the original knife, like a knife being just a knife, the original knife that did everything we as humans needed to do to survive was a sharpened rock, right? Everything after that is just personal preference or aesthetics, really. Maybe not quite. You know, there are certain styles of knives out there, including tactical knives, or when we get to the outdoor genre, hunting knives that are very specifically designed to fulfill a specific purpose. But I'm going to boil down, boil this down just a little bit, and I want to talk about the kind of the bushcraft genre of the outdoor knife, because if we just leave it to outdoor knives, it could be anything from a skinning knife to a fillet knife to a big chopper that you're going to use at camp, or just a day hiking knife. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. But bushcraft as a genre kind of encompasses a lot of the things that make most outdoor knives really good. So I'll start there. I got an example here. This is the Condor wood lore. They don't make it with the micarta scales anymore. This is one of the ones I had at home. And kind of the whole bushcraft mentality stems out of, indigenous people's survival skills. And I almost hesitate to use the word survival because when we talk about survival knives as a genre, there's a little bit of a difference there. But all those indigenous living skills are kind of channeled through what the bushcraft community is supposed to embody. And as such, you'll typically find smaller and simpler knives overall. This guy right here is a carbon steel blade, a little bit over 4 inches, about 4.5. You'll also tend to find Scandi grinds on bushcraft knives a lot, because the word bushcraft originally, even though it's a huge thing in the United States now, it kind of came to us from the Northern European cultures where this type of grind was very good for wood carving. And a lot of bushcraft skills center around carving wood, making stuff. So you'll tend to see that a lot. You'll also tend to see a centerline point a lot because bushcraft skills involve a lot of drilling, that sort of thing. Survival, like I said, as a genre of knife is different, but when it comes to the skills, there's a lot of overlap between bushcraft and survival. But survival knives tend to be, not always, but can be a little bit bigger and tend to have a little bit of crossover into the tactical realm, because a lot of survival schools and survival training that happens in the United States, at least, comes more from a military background. Again, there is a lot of crossover between survival and bushcraft, but this is stripping things away to kind of what has influenced these genres of knives. And this Becker BK7, which you can see right here, one of my personal knives, kind of embodies that. It has a bit of tactical stuff going on. In fact, Ethan Becker designed this as sort of a modern take on the original K-Bar Mark II fighter. Kind of is a little bit of a prototypical survival knife for a lot of people these days, because you get a blend of the pure tactical stuff with something that's going to work outdoors, but definitely leans more towards the tactical. You've got a more acute point here, but you still do have a shape that's going to work pretty well. But a survival knife can have a tendency to be a little bit larger sometimes, not always, but you're more likely going to see a larger survival knife than you will a larger bushcraft knife. You'll also be more likely to see more aggressive finger guards and more likely to see stuff like protruding tangs. Not exclusively, you can see all of these things on a bushcraft knife as well. Again, we're talking generalities here. But moreover, kind of the difference between the two genres of knives is there's a little bit of a philosophical difference just behind the ideas of survival and bushcraft. Essentially with bushcraft, well, I'll start with survival. Essentially with survival, it's because you've been put in a situation and you're trying to get out of it. That is the survival, the quintessential survival scenario. With bushcraft, it's not that you're trying to survive a situation you've been, forced into. With bushcraft, you're trying to head out there and really thrive off the land. And like I said, skill sets definitely overlap, but there is a little bit of that just kind of mindset difference between the two schools of thought. Neither one's worse or better, but of course, in either case, you're gonna wanna work with nature and not against it. In terms of a fixed blade, at least, it's gonna, I think, combine the two really well. I've always liked the Mora Bushcraft Black. They start at about $40 these days. You've certainly got a very bushcraft inspired blade shape and grind, short enough that it's going to be easy to manage and maneuver, but you've got a little bit of slightly tactical things going on with a little bit of a finger guard right there. You've got the straight clip point here that's going to pierce really well. Just kind of fits, especially, aesthetically, at least with the black coating as well. As for some folding knife options, we have done a folding survival knife video that shows things across a range of price points, so we'll make sure to leave a link to that so you can check out some options there as well. All right, next question comes to us from Graham Proctor. Hey David, I'm always on the lookout for a great slicing pocket knife. Currently using a customized bug out. Any recommendations on a new knife that is as thin of a blade or thinner? Sure thing, I got a thinner one for you. We'll start with the bug out as the point of reference. Obviously this is not a customized one, this is just stock. S30V blade, 3¼ inches, nice and thin with a high flat grind, about $130 right now. Great slicing profile, slicier than most of the things out there these days, which I always like to see. Slicing is good on a small pocket knife. Maybe check out the Spyderco Chaparral. It's not quite as much edge length going on, but it's got a full flat grind and blade stock that starts even a little bit thinner than the bug out. These are really, really nice slicing pocket knives. Blade length comes in under 3 inches. This particular version is, where's the price there? Comes in about $140 with the carbon fiber handles, but there are less expensive versions out there as well. XHP steel, it's gonna hold an edge very nicely. And depending on your preferences for actual feel in the hand, there is something to be said for the choil you get on the Chaparral, although I do like the feel of the bug out myself very much also. So, I don't know, one's not better or worse than the other, but when you're talking about thin, slicey knives, Chaparral's right up there in its efficiency with that bug out. All right, next question comes from Max Long. Hey DCA, I work in production and I open a ton of boxes and packages throughout the day. I currently use a K-bar dozier with AUS 8, but the blade seems too thick. What's a good slicer for boxes that doesn't completely break the bank? Currently thinking perhaps a Para 3 lightweight, but would love your input. Sure thing. One thing, I think I know where you're coming from with that dozier knife. Because it's a hollow ground knife, they're going to be really thin behind the edge, but as it gets up towards the shoulder, you're going to be fighting more resistance. So for that reason, I like a full flat grind on a fairly thin blade myself. Either of the two knives we just looked at are going to be a good option. Para 3 lightweight, I think, is going to be pretty nice, like you asked. Honestly, that type of grind, that type of edge geometry, blade geometry and blade thickness, Para 3 is a little bit thicker. Spyderco kind of does that across pretty much anything in their lineup. So you're going to do well looking at a lot of anything in their lineup, really, that strikes your fancy. Para 3 lightweight, if you're opening a lot of boxes throughout the day, the scales might start to feel, or handles might start to feel a little thin, especially you might get a little bit of a hot spot here on the leading edge. I think the G10 versions of this are going to be more comfortable for a lot of boxes and packages like you mentioned, but they are a little bit more expensive as well. So in answer to your question, yes, it would be a very good choice. All right, now that brings us to our lightning round for today, which is going to be all about sharpening. So let me blow through your sharpening questions here a little bit more rapid fire. Micah V asks, is it better to sharpen a knife frequently or wait until it starts to rip and tear material before sharpening it? Well, I think the saying goes, I don't know if this is actually a saying or not, but I've always thought of it is maintain your edge constantly and you'll have to sharpen very, very rarely. And by that I mean get yourself a good strop. You can certainly make them yourself. They're not that hard to make. You could get a rigid strop or a free hanging strop. This one right here is pretty cool from Harold Sullingen is the company. It's 4-sided. One of the sides actually comes with a fine stone if you need it, and then 3 other sides with leather preloaded with some abrasive polishing compounds already. If, end of the day or even end of the week, if you don't use your knife too much, if you just strop it gently, learn how to do that. We'll leave a link to our video on that as well. You might get to a point where you feel like you almost never have to sharpen your knife, but you still have a razor sharp edge all the time because you're just refining your edge that's already sharp and keeping it there. If you let it go too far and you have to take out chips, that's just annoying, and you're going to be dealing with a less than optimal edge the whole time. Maintain a lot, sharpen never, well, almost never. Next question comes from Scott Chenoweth. Says, I have a cold steel Recon Tanto in VG1, having a hard time getting that hair popping sharpness. Any suggestions? So it's real hard to troubleshoot this from just a comment like that without observing what you're doing. But it could be a number of things. One, it might just be more practice. I don't know what level you're currently at. You might need a finer grit stone. Maybe the stone you're stopping with is still too coarse to really get that hair shaving edge. And if you're almost there but you're still not getting it, strop. Again, learning how to finish things out with a strop after whatever sharpening method you're using is really going to be a big help. Leave a link to maybe our whole sharpening playlist down below. Yeah. Something like that. But stropping is always the thing that like takes the edge from like almost there to like right over the top. Yeah, very, very good thing to know how to do. All right, next question comes from Old Hound Dog. Longtime listener, first time caller. Can a Spyderco Sharpmaker be used to remove chips from a knife blade? Yes and no. I think the one of the great things about the Sharpmaker is it doesn't remove a lot of metal, at least in the base format, but that's also working against it for chip repair. It can be done. You'll probably want to look to the diamond abrasives or the CBN abrasives that they sell separately. If you really need to remove some metal to get through some chips, you're going to need a more aggressive abrasive like that. The diamonds are the most aggressive that they currently sell for it. So check those out and then use the stones that come with it to finish the job. All right, next question. David Campbell says, what grit on sharpening would you grind up to? The most extreme I can find would be a 16,000 grit, but I'm working to 8,000 at the moment. First, the question I gotta ask is if you're sharpening up to that 8,000 grit, is it sharp enough for you? Then you can stop there. If you want more, certainly you can go to the 12,000 and keep getting more and more grain or scratch refinement as you get up to, working up to a mirror polished edge, which can be good or bad depending on what you're cutting actually, but that's another conversation. I can tell you what I do personally. I tend to use my Strop with strips of wet dry sandpaper as my abrasive medium if I actually do need to sharpen. And for me, I'll usually work up to an 800 grit on that, which is actually pretty low for most people. And then, use the compound loaded sides of the leather to get my edge finished and where I want it to. Maybe I'll increase that a little bit. I'll play around with like a 12,000 or 6,000 grit, or 1,200 or 1,600 grit paper.
It's a lot of grit.
It's a lot of grit. Maybe I'll mess around with those and see. I haven't mixed up my sharpening regimen on that in a while, but it has worked really well for me. I can get a hair shaving, paper curling edge very nicely with that setup. If you want to make your own strop, for about $10, we do sell our own, not ours, but Marbles makes a nice set of assorted compounds you can get. I usually use just the black and then the green myself, but there's all kinds of stuff you can play with here. Yeah, but in terms of like how high should you go? Are you getting the results you want? That's the only answer to the question because there's no right or wrong right there. All right, last lightning round question comes from Penn Local Crew. Could you please explain how to sharpen the cold steel 6-inch Kris Ti-Lite? Sure thing. Essentially, you would sharpen this kind of Kris style blade the same way you would sharpen anything with a recurve. And there's stuff you can do with homemade strops, but by far the easiest is a rod-based sharpening system. Whether it's the Sharpmaker, Lansky makes a lot of these style of crock sharpeners. But the gauntlet from Spyderco might actually work a little better than their Sharpmaker because of the shape of the stones. It's a nice elliptical shape here, which will allow you to get into the curves, the multiple recurves of that Kris blade. One thing to note, you might wind up knocking the tip off a little bit, in which case you could just come back on the spine and refine that a little bit. But any kind of recurve, especially when you're dealing with a lot of recurves, rod-based systems are definitely the easiest way to do it. Which brings us to our last comment, the most serious question of the day, which comes from AKA Pabs. Sure. I've been working out every day and I still haven't seen any results. Any tips on how to get those larger than average sized hands? I don't even think I used my unintentional catchphrase this episode.
You have now.
Well, he has. I thought about recommending you to like Google methods for increasing your hand size, but I would probably just say make sure Safe Search is on before you do that. Just precaution.
Maybe add a VPN on top of that.
Yeah. Be careful on the internet, folks. That is it for today. Let me know what you thought of my answers down in the comments, and if you want a chance to get one of your own questions featured, leave them down below as well. If you want to get your hands on any of these guys, we'll leave links in the description as always to take you over to KnifeCenter.com. Make sure you sign up for the Knife Rewards program, so when you put your money down on one of these knives today, you can earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center, signing off. See you next time.